And thank you so much. So one of the areas that you identified was how to write a case study. How to write a case study. Case studies can be used in advocacy. They can be used in evaluation. They can be used for different reasons. I remember, and I'll share, actually, let me do that. Let me do that now before we start. I just want to share with you a link of a series of case studies. I remember I was once involved in writing. Please, if you have case studies that you have seen that are interesting, please do share the links here so that we can, follow up after the call. Let me just share the link here. Now, where do I find that chat tab? 1 second. There we go. And there, right. So during COVID-19, I mean, we are still technically in a COVID-19 era, but when COVID-19 was still quite intense, WHO, which is the World Health Organization, commissioned the collection of case studies. And I happened to be invited to help with that process. And I was collecting stories, cases from different countries, as African continent. And we're looking at how different organizations, both youth-led and non-youth-led, were adapting their services for provision of services during COVID-19. And the goal was to highlight the resilience of organizations in responding to COVID-19. I remember one of the cases was peer-led support groups led by Zandiri in Zimbabwe. That's an example. I remember there were examples from Kenya. There's some work being done by Y-Act on UHC. I don't recall if we had examples from Zambia. We had from South Africa and so forth. Then I think one from Nigeria, Benin. But if you have time, just read that link. It's an example of a type of case study. So when you read and scroll down on the link at the bottom, you'll find like the country-specific case study profiles. So when you look at case studies, it depends on what you want to achieve. Case studies can be used for different reasons, different audiences. So please, during the session, if you have specific things that you want to use case studies for, please do ask if you have questions that are not addressed by this session. What I've decided to do is to focus on more general case studies, advocacy case studies, and to share templates as well that can help you to unpack what a case study is. So unlike the previous sessions, I will not start with asking you to define what a case study is. But what I will do is I will share the definition that is prepared, and then I will invite you to share any examples, any experiences you've had of collecting case studies for advocacy purposes. I'm interested in learning more about your experiences. So when we refer to a case study, we're talking about a written account of work that has been done in advancing an advocacy agenda. So in this case, we're talking of advocacy case studies. So normally advocacy case studies are used to inform policymakers and other audiences so that they have a picture of successful examples of advocacy. Oftentimes, we are negative when we think of policy change. And in such instances, when, for example, policymakers or organizations that you want to partner with you, when they don't think that it's possible, you can share examples of where this advocacy has been successful. You can share examples from other regions or provinces or states or counties. You can share examples from other countries. And so when you look at the issue that you are trying to advocate for, reach out to normally the UN, UNFPA, UNICEF, WHO, UNDP, UN Women, UN AIDS. These different UN agencies are constantly commissioning case studies as part of their evaluations of work being done. So you are likely to find examples of case studies from there. But this session is to help you create your own case studies. When we were concluding yesterday's session on advocacy planning, I shared some examples of my own experiences of advocacy. I was responding to a question, I think it came from Jerry, on social media advocacy and planning for social media advocacy, and asking if it is effective, as a tactic for advocacy. And I shared my examples. So if, following from that, I should and can then write a case study of this successful advocacy. And this case study will include what tactics were used by others. How did I contribute to it? And what were the results? And what are the gaps? And what remains to be addressed? So case studies are just a helpful tool to convince audiences that don't think that change can happen. They are also a useful way of sharing your experience in addressing the issues. For example, you might find policymakers that don't think that you have the capacity to influence change to ensure that there's comprehensive sexuality education. But if you have examples of successful advocacy on comprehensive sexuality education or other issues, write those case studies, and then you can package them so that they can be delivered to these audiences to convince them that you have the ability to successfully advocate. So case studies are also a history or an account of campaigns and events, which include lessons that have been learned and insights that can be applied more broadly. I shared earlier today on the policy analysis, actually on the advocacy planning, when I was inviting you to share your monitoring and evaluation plans for this project. And one of the things that I want to add on to that is I constantly get involved in conducting evaluations, as I mentioned. One of the weaknesses that we have, particularly in the youth civil society organization space, is we are not good at documenting our successes. So when one generation leaves and another generation of advocates comes in, they start from scratch. And they have to rely on asking this one and that one and that one, and everyone has a different account of what worked. So case studies help you bring all that information together so that they can be used as a tool for learning and insights sharing, both for other actors that want to get involved in the issue, as well as for policymakers that you are interested in having take part in what you want to do. So I'm going to pause here before we talk about characteristics of case studies and so forth. I just want to know, have you ever seen a case study? Have you ever written a case study? What did it involve? What was it about? I need to hear your experiences around case studies before we continue. If you haven't seen a case study before or experienced or been involved in writing one, you can also let us know. But my goal is to make sure that at this point we get just a bit of time to talk. You can use the chat box. You can unmute your microphone and let me know. what has been your experience around case studies? Have you seen a case study? If yes, what was it on? Were you involved in developing it? What was your role? What did it achieve? I just want to know. It can be on any issue. Right, and welcome to those just joining in. I see Arnold just joined in. Jovin also joined in a bit later. Yeah, so please, let's participate. We have Nima here, Jovin, Jerry, Emmanuel, Arnold, Alice. Have you ever seen a case study? First question. Have you ever seen a case study besides the one that I sent a link on? Have you ever seen a case study? Let's talk. Alice, have you seen a case study before? Emmanuel, I see you've unmuted your mic. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yes. I've seen quite a number of case studies, including, let me say, the two that I've done for academic purposes. I think for my undergraduate program, I had to do a research, so I ended up doing a case study. And for my postgraduate, I'm also building on my previous case study on a particular issue. So I have an idea from an academic point of view.
Great, thank you, Emmanuel. Is the one you did previously, the one that's already completed, is it shareable? Like, is it quickly accessible? Are you able to, even send it through the chat or something, or it's a bit far?
It is far. I submitted it to the school, and it is on my personal laptop, which is 7 hours drive away.
No worries, no worries. Would you want to talk us through that one? What were you writing, compiling data on for that case study? Please just walk us through. And how did you do it?
Okay, so my case study mostly, my undergrad is in mass communication and public relations. So I took interest in just wanting to find out the effect that the cybercrime and security law that Zambia passed a few years ago, that should have been in 2020. So my thought has been to find out from digital media houses, like, do they feel that the Cybercrime Act is an infringement on their work? So we say that the act itself does not explicitly define what online harassment is. Then on top of that, it also gives some individuals the rights to inspect or run through your computers or tap into your digital communications. So the question that I was trying to answer or to find out on was, how will this policy affect digital journalists or online journalists? How is it going to affect the whistleblowers? Because mostly we get to learn that information in this day and age, it's passed through phones, WhatsApp, through calls and other things. So having an act or a law that allows the government and some individuals have access to your laptop, to your online information, that becomes a risk. So with what I did, I was able, since the media space is quite broad, so we've got people that are doing broadcasting, we can categorize them in vlogging and blogging, and then, plus podcasts rather. So my interest in my first work was on blogging, those that are blogging, like what effect does it have? So I was able to talk to a few, and I got their sentiments. Then for this one, I've continued, but unlike targeting particular journalists or online journalists, I'm now focusing on institutions. So the first one was on the digital journalists themselves. And then for my postgraduate, I'm focusing on digital media houses. Yeah, in a nutshell, like that's what I'm doing. So I had to identify the issue, or rather the problem, and set my objectives with my research questions. And yeah, went on building, understanding what I want to get at the end of the day.
Right. Thank you, Manuel, for that example. Yeah, as I mentioned, case studies can be used for different reasons. In this case, they're being used for academic reasons. And the case was not about, collecting evidence about an advocacy campaign or activities that were done, but it was more about highlighting a case with respect to a specific approach to doing things. So case studies are broad. And if you look for guidance on case studies, you find quite a lot of resources referring to different things. So it really matters what you want to use your case study for. I'll just invite one more person who has any experience to share around case studies, to share with us, what have you encountered a case study? Have you written a case study? Have you read one? What is it about? Just one more person, then we continue with the session. So we've heard from Emmanuel. We're yet to hear from Alice, from Arnold, from Jerry, from Jovin, and Nima. So would any one of you want to share? All right, it seems we're a little bit shy today. At present, I'm sure we're a little bit tired. I'll call upon you again later on and still invite you to share. Oh, Arnold, I saw you unmuted. Would you like to share?
It was the academic case study, my undergraduate. It was focusing on to see the applicability of the international laws in our domestic. So focus was in the first one was to choose the title from our academic level and to set the objective of the case study we are making, and to choose the institutions which will be stationed therein and to collect the data. So because the focusing was on the applicability of the international law in our domestic laws, basing on some conditioning were set on the law. So before, as a country in Tanzania, before applying the international law, we have something to domesticate in our laws so that we can apply it. So we're trying to see the effectiveness of that clause. So the collection of data was much focusing to the judiciary, some kind of advocates, state attorneys, to get different informations on the applicability of that clauses, regardless, focusing on the current situation, because the law it was 19 something. So we are trying to see the effectiveness until to this current, is it applicable, what the rationale behind to set the criteria, focusing on the just in change who are focusing on more practice to see the effectiveness. So we collect the data. At the end of the day, we make the analysis, get some recommendations. Then we write a report focusing on the data we collected and the recommendations and the way forward. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. It's helpful to hear, these examples of how we've gathered case studies. If you also have it anywhere close, Arnold, it would be good if you could share the link. We'd love to read it. If it's far, that's fine. But if it's shareable, please do send the link. I saw Jovin. Jovin also had unmuted. Did you want to share your experience? Jovin, are you there? Okay, so I guess maybe it was by mistake. So all of these are really good examples of the use of case studies. Oh, Jerry, I see. Okay, Jerry says, I haven't seen one. So I haven't seen a case study. That's fine. Let me see. All right. So for those who are just joining us, I'll just reshare the link I shared, which has a couple of case studies. They're not advocacy case studies, but they're general case studies. I'll also share, I once was involved in, not once, but a couple of times, but at some point there was a evaluation of UNFPA's approach to UNFPA's youth strategy. It was a formative evaluation of UNFPA's youth strategy. And I took on the responsibility of coming up with a country case study for Zimbabwe to share and highlight how Zimbabwe's country office was implementing the My Body, My Life, My World strategy of the UNFPA. So I had to interview people. I had to interview country office members. I had to review documents. And then I had to write what I found, identifying the gaps, identifying the strengths, coming up with recommendations. And then I took that write-up back to the country office for review. All of this was based on interviews and documentation. So these are just different ways in which you collect case study data. What I'm enjoying about this session is we have quite a lot of that information already. We've experienced quite a lot. If you have conducted case studies academically, it shouldn't be that difficult for you to do it for advocacy purposes, because the scope is reduced and you will see the utility. You will not get a degree after you create this case study, but it will help to change your community if your advocacy is successful. So moving on to the next slide. Here are a few steps. I would say there are 3 general steps that you need to follow if you are conducting an advocacy or collecting data to write an advocacy case study. The first one, of course, gather evidence from different sources. So identify the issue and gather information about the issue from different sources. You can ask organizations that are working on the issue. You can talk to government departments. So these are interviews. When you talk to organizations and government departments, also ask them to share documents with you, reports, analysis, evaluations that have been done around the issue. It's called snowballing. Yeah, it's a fancy term, but it just means, listen, if you talk to one person, ask them to refer you to other resources and other people you can talk to, and then you keep building out your list from there. It's a very easy, technique if you are having difficulty finding information to begin with. So talk to people. People will refer you to other people. When you read documents with evidence, check the references. Check the references at the end of the reports, at the end of the articles. Those references are links to other documents. That's snowballing again. They are links to other documents that you can also read for yourself. Remember, when someone refers to a document in their document, they'll always talk about it from their perspective. So it's always better if you can go straight to the source. If it's an advocacy issue, read all the relevant policies, your constitution, analytical documents, newspaper articles, and so forth, public opinion pieces, gather evidence, and then tell the story through your eyes based on your perspective. A case study is not as thorough as a policy brief. A policy brief is not as thorough as policy analysis. So these are smaller outputs that you can use as tools for your advocacy. So a case study, you don't have to do too much, analysis and so forth, but make sure, again, that it's evidence-based, and then you tell the story based on the data that has been collected. After you've gathered the evidence, draft a narrative. Tell a story. Look at all the information. Here's what I do in the work that I write. Every single day I'm writing. Even yesterday, whilst Manchester United was being walloped, I was writing. As a Man U fan, I think I'm in a bit of pain. Anyway, you're right. I see, Emmanuel, maybe you are. I feel like you are a Chelsea fan. We'll see. So you come up with a story. You come up with a story based on the data you've collected. And the best way to tell a story is look at all the data and then come up with subheadings. So, and when you come up with those subheadings, you start to take evidence that links to those subtopics. And then you start to tell the story using the evidence under those subheadings. The reason why I do that is people read from the top going down. They start with the heading, the first line, first sentence, before they try and make sense of everything else. There are some people that do not even read what's inside. They only read the things that are on top. So if you want to be an effective writer of a case study, think about creating subheadings before you start to write your story, and make sure all the evidence is included in your different subheadings. Don't leave anything out. That's the tool I use. It can take a bit of time, but it will ensure that you have, one, included all the evidence, and two, you are telling a story according to how you understand the evidence. Lastly, test your story against the original version and view the write-up as a reader might. So this is just editorial advice. This is editorial advice. So you can even compare your case study with another case study and check, is the language okay? Is this clear enough? Is this what I wanted to say? You can even ask other people to read for you. Sometimes when you write according to how you understand. You write with passion, specificity, but someone else can pick up, that case study document, or you send them via email, they look at it, they say, I don't really understand. What did you mean here? Remember we said, because we are social justice activists, we always need to work to make sure that whatever we produce is accessible. So you can test the document, ask someone else to read it for you. You can also, sometimes I'm also a musician. I create music. Sometimes you can be trying to write a song, but the words are not coming. One thing that we normally do in studio is you stop. If the energy and the motivation is not there, you stop writing. Stop trying to sing. Listen to other music, other stuff that is not even yours. And then later on, maybe after 30 minutes, you come back. You come back and listen to it again. And normally, just taking some time away from the document and coming back to it later, it helps you to read it and see it from a different perspective. So you can read it as though you are unfamiliar with the topic, and you ask yourself, does this make sense? Or can I easily explain it to someone else? If you have a young brother, young sister, sibling, and so forth, or nephew or something who's nearby, and you have something to promise them, because it's not easy to ask people to read case studies. Just ask them to read and ask them if it makes sense. Or ask someone who has no idea about sexual reproductive health, child marriage, whatever. Just ask someone who just doesn't know about the technical issues to read it and let you know if it makes sense. Yeah. It's a good time if you're dating. You can ask your partner, can you have a look at this thing? Let me know if it makes sense. And yeah, I do that sometimes. So that can also help. That can also help. Right. So in the previous step, we looked at the steps of writing a case study. So the 3 essential components of a case study. Now, here is an example, right? This is like a template. We'll provide this in the guideline document. So I just thought I'd describe the sections to you. Sections you can use. This is not a gold standard. You can write a case study your own way. You can use your own templates, but these are just examples of how you could do it for advocacy purposes, right? So your title, share the results of your findings, provide the background, highlight the strategy, policy-wise, the lessons learned and next steps, and you also provide acknowledgements. So it's just one of many templates that you can use. So ask yourself, what do I want to conduct or collect data on for the case study? And what's the key information that I need to make sure I provide? Yeah. So you can also create your own framing for this. But for the purpose of today's session, I'll share how you can use these 6 organizing sections to help you with writing a case study. Right. So first of all, the title, very similar to what we mentioned around the policy brief and the policy analysis. Be outcome-oriented in devising the title. Treat it like a newspaper headline. You know, newspapers sell because of the headline. Sometimes, however, newspapers write misleading headlines just to get your attention. And then when you go in there and you read, you're like, you know, this is not what they said. And you just see that they played around with the words. So don't be dishonest like some newspapers are. But do treat it as a headline. Make sure it's informative, it's attention-grabbing, and it draws people to it. It should be catchy, and it should grab the reader's attention. So if you're providing an overview of activities that have been done, like advocacy activities, summarize what was accomplished and describe the change that has happened and that you were working to achieve. So provide detail on the implications of the change. So what did the change mean for different population groups? Okay, so maybe we did advocacy to provide youth-friendly health services. What changes took place for the different population groups as a result of our advocacy? Did they start accessing services? Were health centers that didn't provide youth-friendly services held to account? What happened? Were social norms changed? Were attitudes, changed? What took place? Also, what was the potential impact that had on different development outcomes? Did it improve sexual and reproductive health outcomes of the population? Did it improve educational prospects? Did it improve employment prospects? It can be very difficult for you to concretely say that what we did had that impact, but you can share on the potential impact that your project, campaign, approach had on different development outcomes. And there are ways in which you can show that. So there's what's called outcome harvesting, for example. There are stories of change. There are different evaluation tools that are created to help map if an activity or campaign or project has had any impact on the targeted population. And that includes impacts on their sexual and reproductive health. So maybe in your county, your region, your province, there's now an increase in the percentage of young people uptaking sexual and reproductive health services. And maybe there was a survey done to ask young people where they've been hearing about or what has caused the change in their uptake of services. And you can, based on that evidence, be able to say, okay, so it seems our intervention did contribute to creating this impact on young people's sexual and reproductive health. So in that section of the case study, you can provide that information. For the third section, we need to describe the problem or issue and explain why it is important. We give a description of the context. We include issues around the political climate, different indicators, health, social, educational, and any existing advocacy efforts on the issue. So it's a reminder to help people understand, why did we do this to begin with? Why was it important for us to carry out the interventions that we did? What's the background? What was the context? And then we explain how we got to the results. I know this is like going from reverse, but that's how case studies are. You know, they start off with the most essential information and then work their way back to help people understand how you came to that conclusion. Particularly case studies that are sharing an experience of a good practice or activities that have been done or campaigns that have been conducted in the past. So this section, as I said, you can detail the results that were achieved and provide a guide. You know, when you are working on an issue, it's hard to think of yourself as like a leader, like a role model. It's hard to see your project as a good practice or as a model until it's done. So when your project succeeds, you have to, you know, when you start to collect data for a case study, help people understand, why did it succeed? What strategies did you use? What were the tactics that you employed at different points of the journey? What were the drivers of success? The whole point is, if someone wants to replicate, to redo, re-engineer your success, you're providing them with a roadmap that they can use to adapt or to modify the strategy for their own use. The link I shared with you has, I think at the end of the project, we had about 8, I think, case studies. So if an organization wanted to try and adopt, you know, a similar approach, they could go there and read and see, okay, this looks interesting. And then we also included the link to the websites, contact details of the different organizations. So if they wanted to find out more, they could do that. So case studies are utility focused. So take time to explain how you did what you did so others can see and replicate. You can explain different aspects of the strategy, including your goals. What are your goals? What are your objectives? What approaches did you use? What are your key activities? What difficulties did you face? And what sources of support did you receive? So you revert back to your planning and so forth, and make sure you provide that detail for people to be able to use. And then you think this requires a bit of time. You have to develop lessons learned and next steps. So based on the activities that we did, you've shared already, you know, these are the strategies that we used, the tactics. What were the lessons that you learned whilst implementing? What is it that you thought was easy that proved to be hard? What is it that you thought was hard that proved to be easy? What are the lessons you learned about your primary audience and their response to your interventions? What did you learn about money, you know, in the use of funds to do different things? What was more cost effective? What was less cost effective? What resulted in the audience responding more? What resulted in the audience responding less? What is it that got a lot more public support? What got less public support? What about time? You know, we thought we would conduct this activity in 6 months. Did it happen in 6 months? If it did, okay, what was the lesson? Oh, okay, so we can do this in a short period of time. This can be delivered on a short-term basis if these conditions are met. But maybe it took longer. So, okay, if you want to conduct this change, the lesson learned is you need a bit more time because there's this and that and that and that that you need to consider before you design, you know, and deliver your intervention. Think like a leader who is trying to inspire others to adopt the approach that you've shared. Celebrate your success, own your success, but also derive and identify lessons from your success that you can transfer to others for them to use. In evaluations, for example, we use case studies a lot because evaluations are utility focused mostly. An evaluation means nothing if no one will use it. Like, why spend so much time asking all these people what worked if no one will be interested in reading that information and using it to improve what they want to do anyway? So you have to take a similar approach. Around the lessons learned and next steps, share details on the steps that are being taken to make sure that the achievements are sustained over time. Yes, you can have achieved advocacy success this year, but you have to continue to engage. Accountability, you have to stay involved in the different committees and so forth. How are you making sure that these achievements are sustained even after policymakers change, even after governments shift, even if there's a climate crisis, as is happening in our different countries? How are you making sure that those achievements are sustained over time? Lastly, describe what the follow-up activities will be, including what the next advocacy target related to the effort will be. Maybe this was just one campaign and you had 3 other campaigns that were meant to follow. Provide that information, because if you don't, someone will think, if I want to change this law, all I have to do is do this activity. Then they do the activity and it doesn't succeed. Then they come back to you and say, you sold me a lie. But it turns out you just didn't give them full information. So be as helpful as possible. Also be as realistic as possible. I know sometimes we like to paint ourselves as the best. Sometimes ego will get to us. We want to paint this perfect picture, because we think if we paint a perfect picture, the funding will come. But let me tell you, it's important to paint a full picture, because that shows the maturity with which you are handling your subject matter. You are not biased to only reflect one side of the story. You are also conscious and humble enough to reflect on even the weaknesses, the flaws, and even to appreciate that we didn't do this on our own. We were not able to achieve this through just one intervention. We had to add it on to this, work with these people, and so forth. So be realistic. Be realistic. The last section normally is acknowledgements. Most times you look at who did you interview, who provided you with data, who supported the research. Sometimes you might even hire, or work with assistant researchers, people who come on board to particularly support the development of that case study. Acknowledge people. Acknowledge people. We also live in an industry where you can put in the work without the acknowledgement. You can write a report. You can, provide very important insights, and then someone else takes the credit. That's exploitative. That's unjust. That doesn't reflect the values of a social justice activist. So remember that in all you do, be ethical. Provide recognition to funders, partners, contributors, and even their contact details, particularly if anyone would like to learn more. Remember, you can collect or conduct a case study that's not on something you have done personally. Like these case studies for the link I shared, I was not involved in any of those activities. I just reached out to people, asked them for information, they provided it. So if someone wants to find out more, I'm not the one with the information. I have to refer them to someone else. You can actually become a skilled case study collector. I wouldn't mind hearing that through this project. We've started to collect more case studies, for example, that accelerate young people's access to health services, self-care within the context of UHC. Let's make a habit of collecting stories of success. And there are simple ways to do it, which include conducting or collecting case studies. So as I mentioned, this session is brief because it builds on all this that we've been doing. And I'm happy to say that we can pause at this point. And now I just want to check, do we have questions around case studies? Please, if you haven't spoken or sent a chat message since we started, please, this is your time. This is your time. Don't let the session end without you having had time to contribute. So do you have any questions, comments around case study development? Yeah, any questions on case study development? Did this make sense? Is there anything that did not make sense? Is there something you'd like to learn that you didn't get an opportunity to reflect on? Jacqueline, Joven, Jerry, Alice. I know we've heard from Sam, Arnold, Emmanuel. Any questions, any thoughts on case study development? Or on any, of the topics that we've covered today, especially for those who've been in all three, and even more for those who've been in all four, including the one from yesterday. Do we have any comments? Do we have any questions? Or even a general comment. If the session has not made sense, you can share. If the session has made sense, you can share. What's important is your engagement. Alice, I see you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the nice session. Actually, I was just asking myself, and I think probably you could help me with some answers. The difference between case study and success stories. Because most of the time, what we do in our programs at the end of for example, in the first quarter and the second quarter, we normally gather success stories from the program that we are having, for example, youth care. So, and I've come across this case study. It was written with Save the Children. They were writing about a woman. So it looks like the success story that we are writing. We normally write in our program. So I was just wondering, is there any difference between success stories and case studies, or is there a format that differs differs in terms of writing case studies and success stories?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question, Alice. Very, very good question. I would say yes and no. So the case study we are talking about here is very similar to the success story that you are referring to. But a case study is not just an account of success. A case study is an account of an experience that produced a result. That result might have been a positive result. It might have been a negative result. Also, a success story, as you can tell, already has a particular angle, and it is a story. However, the individual wants to tell the story, it's up to them. But a case study takes more time to unpack because, as I mentioned, it's utility focused. A case study is written for others who want to understand how certain things were done, what worked well, what didn't work, and so forth. It's a more deliberate attempt at doing that. There are some success stories that include that information, in which case they become more like a case study. But when we talk about the case study approach, we're saying, listen, we want to do two things. The first thing, for advocacy purposes, we want to convince audiences that this advocacy can happen, and to help them understand what does it take to bring success in advocacy in this particular area. What can make you fail? What can make you succeed? What works well? What doesn't work? So it's just, I think for me, the difference is in the depth of the analysis of the results and the purpose as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about the two. I prefer a case study because it's easier to share a case study more widely. More people can be able to use a case study because it has a more objective a more objective purpose. But a success story is more subjective because it's success according to who? You see where I'm going. So success is open to, interpretation by different people. They can easily come back and say, no, this is not actually success. Or what else? What else happened? It doesn't open the door for that level of inquiry. But I like both. I would encourage us to try and turn our success stories into case studies by taking more time to unpack how we achieved the results that we achieved, and to talk about the lessons. What did we learn from this that can be useful for other people who are interested in doing the same thing. Alice, I don't know if this answers your question. But I've tried to share some of the differences. They are very similar because a lot of case studies also include stories of success, but they're not always, the same. I've shared another link also. This is a case study I created, and then it's been updated over time. So this can help explain the example I'm giving. So in 2016, right, I put together this case study. This also reflects on your question, Arnold. So this case study I developed via desk review, the one I've sent to your link as a link to your in the chat. But let me see if I can. Yeah, I probably need to share screen so that you don't have to leave this chat. And voila. Can we see, is something popping up in the screen? Right, so this was something, at the time, I was studying innovations in democratic practice. Yeah, sounds fancy, don't worry about it. And what we were invited to do was to contribute case studies on innovative ways of engaging people. And it's part of a platform called Participedia, as you can see at the top of the thing. There are many case studies here. And I conducted this work primarily through desk review. So I looked for documents, articles, etc., and I brought this information together and created this, case study narrative. And different people within the platform have been editing over time to make sure it's accurate and so forth. But all the links are there for the different documents that were referred to, and the methods. So this is very quick, but it's a different type of, as you can see, I spoke about some of the things. There's some analysis here. There's lessons learned. There's influence, outcomes, effects. So what happened, as a result? What happened in the process? What were the methods and the tools used? How was the selection done? The organizing and so forth. You can conduct this type of analysis or collect a case study purely through desk review. However, it is much better if you include interviews with the organizations and the individuals that have been involved in carrying out the activity, so that you can include their contact details as well in that case study. If you can't access them or can't communicate with them for some reason, that's fine. But if you can, please do. Let me see. All right. Yeah, and remember, COVID-19, the experience we had, it helped us to also realize that you don't always have to talk to people physically. I mean, we're here having this virtual engagement. You can also call people, send them emails, ask them to verify. Remember, I told you, you write, you put it together like what I did with UNFPA. After I wrote, even with the initial link I sent you, I sent the write-up back to the organizations and ask them to verify. Is this information correct? Think of yourself like a journalist. You have to verify your sources, and your sources have to verify your information, because most times case studies are put online. And when something is online now, it becomes, people will see it as a fact. And we have to be responsible. Remember the ethics that we spoke about? We have to be responsible for accurate reporting. Be accountable. So whatever you write about someone else or another organization, have the what you call this, the integrity to reach out to them and ask them to verify if what you've written about them is true. I don't know from the Y Plus Global folks, but I think it could be interesting if at the end of the year, we ask the different partners to write case studies of each other. To write case studies of each other and to document each other's experiences in developing and delivering, change as part of the Youth Act initiative. But yeah, that's an idea for a later point. Right. So do we have any other questions, any other comments? I've tried to share some resources there. I hope they're helpful. The links, that is. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything from the Y Plus folks?
Nothing from my end. I just see a question from Arnold. I don't know if you've responded to it. Can a person conduct a case study on desk review rather than physical?
Yes, thank you for highlighting that.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. So the example I gave, the Participedia one, it's an example of a desk review, case study developed purely through desk review. But I have said, if possible, try and also include consultation with the organizations that have been involved. So try to interview them. If you can't interview them, send them an email asking them questions. If they don't respond, send them the completed case study document. Ask them to verify. The most important thing is make sure that the owners of the project and the information can verify that data before it's sent out, because most case studies are published or shared publicly. Yeah. So, and also I mentioned on the physical visitation. Yeah, yes, it helps to meet people in person and find out and question them and their organizations. But the experience we've had with COVID-19, we have so many tools now virtually, and people are accustomed, a lot more flexible to online interviewing. Yeah, I had some questions like when we're developing some of these case study documents. So if you need, guidance on the types of questions you can include when you want to come up with a case study, do let me know. Any other questions or comments? I'm trying to see if we've heard from Jacqueline today. I don't think so. Alice, I see the message. Joven, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I know there's feedback from Joven. I see it. Right, but no, thank you all so much for this session. Do you have any final comments, any final thoughts before we close for today? Okay, I'm assuming. All right, Jacqueline. Okay, I see your feedback. Thank you for that. So tomorrow we have session 5, which is how to create advocacy messages. I think for me, it's the most exciting one. I enjoy putting the guidelines together because this is message development, and you can use this tool for other stuff just so you can be a more effective communicator. And I think it can be really helpful for you as you write case studies, policy briefs, policy analysis, and other advocacy resources. So let's make a date tomorrow. For most of you, that'll be 10 a.m. For me, it's 9 a.m. and colleagues in Zambia. So let's connect then to tomorrow. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And if you're a Manchester United fan, stay away from football, please.
Thank you, Murai. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Murai. Bye.